Welcome back to Head to Heart podcast. I'm your host, Mackenzie Ryder, and that's a little switch up. Your host is usually Jenny Markham, which don't worry, she's here with me. Say hello, Jenny.
It's true. I'm here.
She's here. We didn't get rid of her. But I am your host today. I'm doing a little host takeover, and I just want to introduce myself. If you don't remember, it's okay, but I was on another episode. I think 2 episodes total because I co-hosted an episode with our friend Christina, and then I was interviewed on an episode about self-hatred.
Yes. So your first ever appearance on this podcast was the episode, Does God Want Me to Be Happy or Holy? That was with Christina and myself. And then the second one was, Is Self-Love Biblical?
Yes.
Now this is your 3rd episode, and you're hosting. How did that happen, Mackenzie? No. Finish introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, then tell us why you're hosting.
Okay, this is great. So a little bit about me is that I'm living my city girl dream, okay? I'm living in a city, and that was my dream growing up. So that is my fun fact. I grew up in a small town, and then I came to Minnesota for college, which is where I met Jenny. So now I'm living in the city, and I'm living my life. It's a good time. And now you're wondering how I'm hosting this episode. I don't know how it happened either. I'm just kidding. So Jenny hosted this fun 3rd birthday party for her podcast, and there was a game, and it was podcast trivia. I'm going to tell you, it was tough competition. There were a few of us, and I won. I somehow won. I guessed all the right answers on Kahoot, and I won a prize. Okay, she didn't tell me what the prize was, and I genuinely thought it was going to be like, you get to babysit my child. Or here's a little plant clipping.
I will say I was going back and forth between the host takeover prize for an episode or a candle. But I am glad I chose host takeover and not the candle.
Yes. So that was the prize. It was a host takeover. My jaw dropped. It almost hit the floor. I said, oh my gosh, I get to be the host of Head to Heart. And so here we are. This is our episode.
So Mackenzie and I have planned out this episode. I said, you have complete freedom. You can talk about whatever you want. You can interview whoever you want. You want a guest, I'll get them. You want sparklers, I'll get them. You want a candle, I'll also give you that. So she formatted this whole episode. We prayed about it together. We're so excited to share.
All right. And now over to Jenny with the weather.
Thank you so much, Mackenzie. Well, today I have a weather report for you. It's cloudy, rainy, and a chance that your period might be coming. Now, Mackenzie, have you ever had a painful period where you just do not want to get out of bed?
Yes, I have.
And don't those just suck?
Yes, they do.
Okay, listen, I have to plug this in. I know that 82% of listeners identify as female on this podcast. Wow. Did you know that?
I did know that.
So 82% of you get a period or should be getting a period that's regular. But listen, us women, we sometimes have problems regulating our hormones, balancing them. And you may not even realize it, but let me name some symptoms that would possibly allude to the fact that your hormones may be imbalanced, okay? You cannot sleep at night. You have terrible sleep. Your periods are very painful. You get a lot of hormonal acne, either all the time throughout the month or just around when your period comes. You get mood swings. Those would be some different signs that maybe your hormones are a little bit imbalanced, but do not fret. If you find yourself in that boat, listen, there's always hope. You can always balance your hormones. God made them so that they would balance out and change throughout your cycle every single month. And that's the beauty of being a woman. Now, listen, if you went to an OB, a gynecologist, any doctor, they may say, oh, you know what would help balance your hormones and only balance your hormones? Get on hormonal birth control. But listen, I actually know from experience that it's not going to work. It may, for some people, cover up some symptoms, but it is not actually healing your hormones. I am partnering with a lovely small business. It's called Peace Love Hormones. Isn't that a cute name?
It's so cute.
Yes. Peace Love Hormones. And they take the beautiful herbs and bitters that are just growing on this earth and they make little tinctures, okay? It's a little tiny bottle, and it will help regulate your hormones. And this is not medicine. This is not something you pick up over the counter, because we're not going to solve your hormone problems with more hormones or more medicine. We're going to trust that God made medicine on this earth for you already. And that's through food. It's through herbs, things he already made. So you can buy whatever you'd like at this little tiny shop called Peace Love Hormones. And if you use my link, you will get 15% off whatever you buy.
Wow.
Which is like pretty decent discount.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say about that, is that a life when your hormones are balanced is a good life. Your overall well-being just thrives. Your fertility will thrive. You will enjoy life better. So the link will be in the show notes if you want to scout out that store. Learn a little bit about how you can make your life better, how you could steward your body well. I just had to say it. So that's the weather. That was the full weather report. Back to you, Mackenzie.
Wow, Jenny, thank you so much for that weather report. I actually think that's really cool. Peace, Love, Hormones. And I am a sucker for a small business. So go check it out, everyone. Click that link in the show notes to get that great discount. And I think that supporting our bodies and how God made them is a really awesome thing, especially as women. We have many opportunities to do that. So love that.
Now, Mackenzie, you wrote this whole episode, and I have to ask you a very important question. I don't know if you saw this coming or not. What have you been set free from?
How did you even think of such a good question? Honestly.
Like I've been doing it for 3 years or something.
Jenny, thank you for asking me that question. I have been set free from what we're going to call bandwagoning. I would call myself an anti-trafficking advocate. So as I pursued this kind of attitude of justice, which I feel like is a gift God has given me, I think this attitude of advocacy started at a young age. But as I got into junior high and high school, and I had this lovely thing called social media, it provided outlets for me to post about the issues I cared about, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But as I have grown and walked out my faith in different ways, and the Lord has revealed to me just how to be an advocate in different ways, I realized posting was not super helpful. I think that specifically surrounding the issue of human trafficking, I was bandwagoning. I was jumping on and posting things that were like, end it now. But I didn't know what it meant. And I was really confused when I looked back on a lot of these posts, because I wouldn't even remember what it was about. I'm like, oh, I reposted that because it looked like I wanted to care about it. But what does it even mean? What is this end it movement? What is this organization that I'm actually posting that I support? Because I didn't really know.
I feel like that is a very popular attitude to have. And you, in this conversation, you know so much more than I do about anti-trafficking work, because you've been overseas, you have worked on the restoration side of it, you know a lot, you've studied, you've done your research, and you've moved from bandwagoner to actual advocate. I just think anti-trafficking, from my perspective, and tell me what you think, very trendy topic to say, yes, I am an advocate. And you know what? That's something we all aspire to be, but only a very small percentage of us actually know what that means.
I agree. I think that it is something as Christians, which I think the most of us listening to this podcast would identify as, it's something we want to care about, right? Because it's an affront to the gospel. And I want to share this quote from a woman named Rachel Edwards. And she says, "The proliferation of modern day slavery and sexual exploitation of people is not just a social justice issue for governments, NGOs, or concerned citizens even to address. It's an affront to the gospel and should be on the heart and mind of every Christian." And that really challenged me, because it's something we feel like we should advocate for. But the question is, how do you do that? How do you do it well? And how do you learn what it really all means?
Well, this reminds me of that verse that is, pretty popular, but for good reason. It's one of my favorite verses. It's Micah 6, verse 8. Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. We all aspire to do that. That is The 10 Commandments summarized: love God with all your heart, love your neighbor, do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. It's all summed up in there. We just don't really understand how to the justice part. You say, okay, I do what's right in my own life. What does that look like when other people are involved? I don't know.
I mean, it's not cut and dry. First of all, I just want to say, being a Christian that does justice is going to look different for every single person, right? It's not like I'm giving you the correct formula, because as we know, we're not saved by our works. I think the moment I started to sense this shift from just bandwagoning on justice issues by posting about them on Instagram or whatever was when I had the opportunity to travel overseas. I spent a year long in a country for a global internship, and I got to work with a company that was assisting women who had experienced trafficking. And once I started to learn about trafficking and what human trafficking is, what are the implications of it, and how it's really happening in the world, as opposed to maybe what I thought through rose-colored glasses from the other side, from the safety of my home, just reposting these anti-trafficking things on the internet, it shifted completely, because I saw what it really might look like practically for women to experience trafficking and abuse. And that just changed my mind about how to advocate against this evil that's in the world. And I don't want to paint it in a light that it's horrible or it's the worst thing you can do, because I know that I had the right intentions, and I know so many people just want to know how to support or how to fight against these evils, because they do really care. But I think, yeah, there are ways that we can do that better, and we're all on a journey of learning how to do it. So, Jenny, I have a question for you, my interviewee. What do you think of? What comes to mind when you think about anti-trafficking?
Okay. The first thing that comes to mind, but it's only because we talked about it a little bit before we started recording, was that movement where everyone was writing an X on their hand, on the back of their hand. And what I think of is, I think of something that happens far away, even though I know that it happens here in the United States too. And I also know that it's like common practice in other countries, that's like just so normal. Sometimes we think of like, oh, only evil people would sell their daughter to someone for some money or something like that. Mm-hmm. But these people are just trying to make it day to day. It's not that they have the most evil intentions, and a lot of times they're tricked. I know that sometimes they're not fully aware of what's going to happen to their daughter, things like that. That's about it.
Yeah, it is pretty normal to think that's something that happens far away and it's bad, so I'm just going to put my name on the petition or put a red X on my hand, and we're going to advocate from the other side. And that, once again, it's not a horrible thing, but I think staying in that camp of, oh, it happens somewhere else and it's not really close to my world. I think that many people would be shocked to find out the realities of human trafficking in their own backyards. Unfortunately, this is an issue that happens everywhere, in every state of the United States and almost every country in the whole world. And so there's just so much more to learn. So
I completely agree. And I would think that maybe the majority of our listeners have heard that only from what I said of like, oh, well, I know the bare basics. If we only know that much, how can we actually be advocates?
Let's say we break this down to steps. I think something really important to know if you want to join the fight against human trafficking is to know what it is. What is trafficking? Because, once again, there are lots of stereotypes that I think especially the American church sees, even from videos and advertisements about anti-trafficking or nonprofits that are working against these issues in other countries. And I think that image often is a girl that is taken or stolen away from the life that she knows and locked up in some capacity and forced to do horrible things and just never sees the light of day. And so I think that to understand what trafficking is from the definition will change that perspective and those stereotypes a little bit. So the definition of trafficking is the exploitation of someone for sex or labor through force, fraud, coercion, or deception. And if you really think about that, it's pretty broad, right? A story that I can think of is a girl in this remote village where there's not much access to education or media. And he's going to tell a lot of these families that he has a great opportunity for their daughters to go to school. And going to school and getting a degree would be an incredible opportunity for them. And so oftentimes these families will send their daughters with these men who take their passports and ultimately traffic them to India. And they're not going to school. They're going to be working in a brothel. And so that's how a lot of these things happen, right? It's just, like Jenny said, kind of common practice or like a thing you hear about a lot, but isn't blatantly kidnapping or isn't blatantly a girl chained up. She's just been tricked and doesn't know how to get out because she could walk out of that brothel, right? What's stopping her? But there's threats, there's manipulation, there's belongings like her passport and her any money that she makes. It's not going to be given to her. And so how would she get home, right? And then on top of that, you think about cultural implications like her family not accepting her back because she has been touched by evil or is dirty, so to say. And so there's just a lot of horrible things that go into it, but understanding that these situations happen in more than one way, especially in countless ways that we probably couldn't even describe, is an important first step.
Okay, so I'm glad you said about, she technically could be free to walk out of there, but how, there's so many things. It's not that simple. It's like, how do you get home? How do you even know where you are sometimes? Her family also maybe doesn't even know that she's not in college right now. They could think she's doing great things at college, getting a degree or something, but in reality, she's not. Okay, take us through step 2.
I would say, again, if we're breaking this down into steps, which it doesn't necessarily have to be, but I think another thing that's important to focus on if you want to be an advocate for anti-trafficking is telling people, right? Like what we're doing right now. Once you truly know what trafficking is and obviously are seeking out resources and education to learn more about different trafficking situations in the world that happen in different ways, I think talking about it is truly the next step because you don't have to know everything. Like Jenny is being so gracious to treat me like a little expert, little pro on this topic. But I genuinely think knowing those basics, knowing that definition, right? That it's force, it's fraud, it's coercion, it's deception for sex or labor that is unwanted by the person. Like you can have conversations about that and say, and I think honestly, once you learn that, you're going to start to see it more in the world, in the news, just hearing even about different situations in different countries, you're going to be like, wait, that's trafficking. It's forced labor. Like this person isn't getting paid for what they're doing. And they were told they were going to get paid. Well, that's trafficking. And so kind of bringing up those conversations and making people aware that aren't aware is really important. And I've seen how those conversations are transformational with people that I know even and were for me when I was learning.
I think a safe way to go about it is that if you're like, well, I don't really know much. You just taught me the definition. That's literally all I know. Just go in with more questions than answers. No one's expecting you to have all the answers. Just ask a bunch of questions. No one's going to look at you and be like, what an idiot. Because why would you be expected to know everything that is not currently impacting your life as far as you know?
Especially as we know in the church, right? Fellowship is what it's all about. Like you can study the Bible and pursue your faith with the Lord, and you should independently, right? It's a part of how we are growing as Christians. But when we come together it's radical. Like, we have conversations about a scripture where you're like, I would have never thought about that. You only had that perspective and you shared that with me. I really think that it's similar, and even sitting down and asking the same question I asked Jenny, like, what do you guys think when you hear anti-trafficking, or what do you think human trafficking is? And just hearing different perspectives, because like we're talking about, there are so many, and it's really important to talk about it. Step 3 would be a little bit of a circle back to step 1, which is understanding what trafficking is. I would say the next step is to be willing to learn more and be willing to be wrong, which, hey, it's hard. It's hard out here. Would you say it's easy to admit that you're wrong, Jenny?
Absolutely not.
I mean, it's just a hard thing. And I think being willing to learn more is key. A story that I'll share from my own experience with this is, as I spent time working overseas in anti-trafficking, I saw and I learned from my leaders that although there are many anti-trafficking efforts in the world that have beautiful and pure intentions, just like how when we post and when we advocate from social media, it's good intentions, right? There are things happening such as businesses created for women who've experienced trafficking to get a job and to have financial opportunities that brand their products as survivor made. That, for example, is something I would have posted the crap out of when I was in high school. And I you know what I mean? I still love to explore that and see how I can support through buying maybe a business's item or a piece of jewelry or a pillow that is made by women in Nepal or India or Cambodia, right? But what I learned from my leaders while I was overseas was, what if the brand of survivor made, for example, is actually more harmful than it is helpful? And when I started to ponder that, I was like, oh, well, is it? Have you seen many of those brands with survivor made items?
Yes, I have. And it makes me think, when I see them briefly on social media, and I'll say, oh, that looks cute. Or that's because of the design of whatever it is. But then also I think, oh, that means they employ someone. That's good. And that's as far as my thoughts go.
Mm-hmm. And I agree. It's like usually a super great program in which they're providing jobs for women who are exiting the trafficking situation they're in. And so when I was presented with that question of like, is it more harmful than helpful, I started to realize, like, oh, maybe a little bit of that survivor made model is telling the story for them. Like, say, and I know a lot of you listening to the podcast have experienced various forms of trauma. And yeah, it's imagining if constantly there was kind of this brand or this label on you that was like, hurt by this person, traumatized by this, or just endured this hard thing. And so when I started to view it in that frame of reference, I was like, oh, wow, like maybe there are different ways to empower women who've experienced trafficking. What if there were job training centers for women who had these experiences that could choose their career path, right? Because a lot of those other businesses are just making jewelry or just making handicrafts. And so although they're great opportunities, I know there are women who would rather be working in computer data or computer science or in restaurant and hospitality opportunities. And so, yeah, I just started to see that and learning from my leaders that there are ways to quote unquote stand on the shoulders of those who came before them and look at what we have, like the business model for anti-trafficking, and like, that's really good. But how can we make it even better? Like, let's lose the survivor made brand and let's figure out ways to better market more ethically and not at the expense of telling a woman's story for them. And so stuff like that I think is really important in the vein of being willing to learn more and adapt and change to the culture and the rhythms of trafficking that are happening in the world.
I'm glad you said stand on the shoulders of those who come before us, because then we are very tall when we do that. Yes. Like but it's really easy to look at something, a model of something that came before what you now know. You now know better. You're learning from mistakes in the past. It's easy to look at other organizations who are like 2 steps behind you or something and think, oh, they just do it all wrong. They're harming women. They're harming everyone. And really only seeing the negative. But in reality, we're all learning. So no one is harming people on purpose. Got to give them benefit of the doubt. They think they're doing great. Now, the education piece is we get to show other people what we've learned, learn with them, and then make those improvements, because it's better to do something than nothing. I mean, there's a lot of people who could just criticize and be like, they're doing it wrong. They're trying to rescue girls and they're doing it terribly. But maybe that person is just sitting on their couch, just looking at a post on Instagram, and they're not really doing much of anything. So who's really in the wrong there?
Yes, I think that's exactly what we've been trying to get at the whole episode, is like, what can we do? If it's not posting, what is it, right? Like, what is it? And so I would say an important last step, okay, in how to be quote unquote an anti-trafficking advocate is partnering. And so partnering can look different. And I think my opinion and from my experience, I would say to partner with Jesus, because we know Jesus and we know his heart is for women and men and children. I want to say that as well. All people who've experienced trauma and who have experienced evil against them, sin against them. His heart is for restoration and redemption. And that's his will for your life. It's his will for women in South Asia and the Middle East who've experienced trafficking. That's his will for them, is restoration and healing and freedom. The essential piece is to realize, how can I partner with Jesus in being an advocate against this evil? So there are many, many ways to do this. I would encourage the listeners to do some research in your local area about organizations, nonprofits, and businesses that are doing work against trafficking. And once again, if you don't know a lot about this, you'll probably be surprised to find how many organizations there are, or even how large the issue is in your local city. Reaching out and seeing what volunteer opportunities there are, even to learn.
I have a question. Okay, how do we know someone's looking volunteer opportunities in my area? How do they know which places are credible?
That's a tough question, right? Because it's not like, oh, there are these organizations that you shouldn't partner with, and there are these organizations that you should. I really think building that basis within yourself of knowing and understanding what trafficking is, having conversations about it and being willing and open to learn more will set you up well to kind of seek out the right opportunity for you.
Or maybe you could even talk with, before committing to volunteer there, because maybe you're just now learning about this place, you set up a meeting to talk with someone who works there or the founder of it, to just kind of get to know the background of why they do what they do, how they measure success in it, because that's really hard. Measuring people by numbers, it's awful. It's hard not to, but it's also hard to do that. But then maybe you set up a meeting with that person first before you commit to volunteering there, because that's a big commitment anyway.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And like, I was even thinking, even finding these places in your area to meet with and learn from can be a piece of advocacy, because you're understanding and you're trying to figure out what's happening in my city, like what's happening in my backyard, right? And there are ways to donate money. There are always financial needs in these kind of situations. There are ways to partner in prayer, because we know that that's powerful and important, right? And there are also ways to show up. And oftentimes there are volunteer opportunities for different drives for clothing and for food and for physical needs that these women and children might have. there are a lot of organizations that are partnered with the government as well in a lot of states, because within the U.S., because trafficking is recognized at a governmental level, and the country is doing a lot to fight against it. And so there might be opportunities there. You might specifically have to seek out nonprofits or church programs that you could do a little bit more volunteering with. But there are ways, and really finding the right people to talk to, people that are doing it and that are on the front lines, even especially within these organizations, with all the right consent, talking to women who've experienced trafficking and are comfortable sharing their story is really powerful, because they have experienced it themselves.
And I don't know if the thought pops in any listener's mind of like, I don't know anyone. Well, I think that if we really do get to know people, I'm just saying that it's not as far as you think it is. I'm thinking of one person I know who has experienced it, who taught Sunday school for me when I was little. Isn't that crazy? And we just don't even think about it. Also, this is in our backyard, because I don't know the stat right off the top of my head, but the Mall of America, Minneapolis, huge trafficking hub. So this is not far away. This is actually right in our backyards. Okay, if those are all the wonderfully helpful things we can do, what should we not do? What is not helpful, Mackenzie?
So that's a great question, Jenny. I think I kind of mentioned a few of these things already, talking about the survivor made model, for example, kind of promoting trafficking survivors as a brand. I think that can be pretty harmful. And if you think about the healing process for women and people that have experienced trafficking in their own lives, kind of having it blasted for them or as their identity is not very helpful. And Jenny, actually, on her podcast, the one you're listening to right now, has great episodes about healing from sexual trauma and just walking through that journey with the Lord. And trauma therapy and trauma-informed care is a super important piece in the healing and restoration process for women that have experienced trafficking. And so kind of anything that would deter that process in the advocacy piece. And you see a lot of this done in like prevention work. A lot of prevention work is obviously tied with advocacy, because they are getting people into the fight. You know what I mean? Like donations and kind of supporting efforts that go into countries and teach and equip, and so that there's not the issue of trafficking. And so it's kind of just knowing what we're saying, how we're speaking about this issue, and not sensationalizing it. That's a buzzword, sensationalizing. It's a big one. Could you tell us what that means, Jenny?
Well, here's the thing, is that I think it's probably the equivalent of bandwagoning. And I think that, I don't even know if bandwagon is a verb, but we have turned it into a verb, bandwagoning. I have just bandwagoned. But one thing we were talking about even before we started recording was, you said, well, we need to empower them to speak instead of just speaking for them and assuming what they would say. So I really liked how you added that in there, because it doesn't really feel that great when you are capable of speaking and someone's like, I'll do it for you, no worries.
Yeah. I'm sure you guys have all heard the term like giving a voice to the voiceless, or something like that. It's like, wait a second, who said they were voiceless? Like, they've always had a voice. You know what I mean? People we're trying to help aren't projects. And a lot of times it can feel like that, right? When you have more resources, or you go on trips or opportunities where you're going somewhere to help someone else, it can really often feel like the issue is sensationalized. It's become this really amazing effort that you get to take part in, rather than just showing up and asking, like, God, how can you use me? But also, how can I learn from these people? What do they need? And guess what? Most of the time, and I'm speaking to myself, right? It's like you won't be able to provide the actual solution in the end, a lot of times, right? It's it's really all about learning. You're learning what they need, and you can learn how to best meet those needs, how to give whatever resources you have into the effort of meeting those needs. And so I feel like desensationalizing it is just kind of popping that bubble of it being this really huge, really impossible, really far away thing, and just kind of coming down to the same level and saying, like, how can we be a part of this?
Yes, I like how you included, praying for it. Obviously, prayer is a huge part of it. I feel like, that could be something that you say, oh, well, that's a cliche. Well, it's only cliche because it's true. Like, we cannot save anyone. We cannot help anyone heal. We cannot do it in our own power. So prayer is an essential part. And I'm glad you broke it down, because when I start to pray for like really big global problems like anti-trafficking, I just feel so puny. I just feel so tiny. And I'm like, what do I even say? What do I even pray for? Because I'm like, Lord, please stop anti-trafficking around the world. And then what else do I say? Because it is so broad, so vast. So it is very helpful to have specifics of, I'm going to pray for these specific things. I'm going to pray for this organization in my area, that they would thrive and do good work and help their employees not burn out, all the things. So those are really helpful to break it down for me, because it feels too big for me. I'll say that. And while Mackenzie and I were preparing for this podcast episode, we landed on this verse that was so powerful. We both love it. You actually brought it to my attention. So go ahead, read it.
Yes. So the verse that we want to share is Exodus 34, 6 and 7. And you might have heard it claimed as the Lord's name, because he does explain his name, and it's quoted multiple times. This would be a great time to know the exact number, wouldn't it? It is quoted multiple times in the New Testament in reference to this exact verse. The Lord passed before him, Moses, and proclaimed, the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation.
Boom, mic drop. Well, I love this verse because first part is like, to anyone who has ever experienced any sort of trauma ever, that's little t trauma and capital T trauma, is that he's abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. He keeps his steadfast love. He forgives all sin. So this is a God who is merciful and gracious. He is ready to meet you exactly where you're at. He's not mad at you. All you have to do is call on his name. He is there, abounding in steadfast love. Then the second part is the person who traumatizes, the guilty. He will not let them get away with that uncleared guilt. And I'm not even kidding, I once heard a therapist say, I take great comfort in the fact that there is a hell. But really, I mean, we see injustice and we may feel a whole bunch of things about it. One of those things is that it angers us, and rightfully so. And God gets angry at injustice too, because ultimately it's saddening and it's wrong. And so if we didn't have that anger, it would be kind of like, oh, well, you just don't care. You don't love at all. So there is great comfort in the fact that this injustice that's happening in the world that feels so big that we can't do anything about it, he's actually going to take care of it all in the end. Like, everything will be right in the end.
Amen. I think it's really important to remember the character of God, and knowing that we do live in the new covenant, right? You fast forward to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we know that Jesus, right, it paid for that sin. He has paid for that sin, right? And so your sin is paid for on the cross. And if you believe and proclaim Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you're dead to sin. But so many people sadly do not. The Lord is a righteous judge, and so those sins will be accounted for at the end of time. And even now, like, I deeply know that the Lord has a heart for the vulnerable. I could cry thinking about it. It's like so close to his heart, and he looks after those even that don't know him, that are being exploited across the world and in our backyards. And he sees them, and he is partnering, like I said, with so many people and organizations and just hearts that are open and willing to learn about this issue and do something about it. And he's moving in the world in anti-trafficking. I want to leave it on a note of hope, right? Because we don't have to be hopeless about, like Jenny said, this gigantic issue where you're like, God help. I don't know what else to say. He cares, and he's doing something. And I challenge you to just ask him, like, what can I do to be involved in this? And if you seek him, you'll find him. And I know he'll show up, and he'll answer those open and willing hearts.
Well, I feel like we should wrap up this episode with a prayer. I feel like that's a good way to end this. I'll just say this one little quote first. This is from the documentary. Would you call it a documentary? Yeah, it's kind of like a movie documentary called Heart of Man. Excellent film if you need something to watch, but it has to do with sexual abuse, sexual sin, and how God redeems everything. So it's a beautifully illustrated version of The Prodigal Son with real life testimonies tied in. Dan Allender is one of the testimonies and people speaking on it. And he says a quote that says, "The enemy loves the brokenness that comes with sexual abuse because there is such a high return rate for him in it, that one action he could exploit and there could be a lifetime of shame, self-hatred, guilt, everything. And the enemy cannot have that power over you or anyone else if you don't let him, because Jesus offered you everything it takes to walk free of that he hates what happened to you too, but he can heal and restore it." So let's pray, shall we?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that quote, because I think, that just frames the importance of coming before the Lord and asking him for avenues of freedom and healing for anyone that has experienced sexual exploitation. And so let's do that right now. Lord Jesus, thank you so much for, just who you are and your character of a loving, kind, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love God, whom we can come to now and ask boldly that you would intervene with the issue of human trafficking in our world. God, we know that this problem is prevalent across the world and right behind us, where we're living right now, God. And so I just pray that you would put on the hearts and minds of every listener how they can begin to step into this fight. God, as people who love you and who have understood and received the love you have for us in such grace, would you empower us to move forth in the fight against trafficking? Would we become anti-trafficking advocates who understand what this problem is, who talk about it with fellow believers and others, and just be willing to learn more, God? I pray that you'd lead us and guide us in how to partner with people who are working against trafficking in our areas. I pray for local nonprofits across the United States and the world that are doing this work. I pray that you'd empower them, that you'd strengthen them, and that you give them everything they need, because we know that you care. And we are partnering with you in this fight. So thank you for being a good God. Thank you for all that you are doing in the world and all that you are to do. And we love you and we thank you. Amen.
Well, I have one resource to share, and then I know you have a resource too, Mackenzie. So my resource, I'm just going to link a podcast episode that I listened to in the show notes. It's by Christine Kane. She runs A21. And this episode was specifically about how to pray for anti-trafficking efforts around the world. She tells amazing stories of how prayer is working, currently making a huge difference in how you can join in that. It really helped me in not struggling to pray for something that feels so big.
Yes, I will have to listen to that episode. My main resource that I'd like to plug is my people over at Exodus Cry. I don't know if you're familiar, but it's an incredible, informative resource about human trafficking, and specifically the Exodus Cry podcast, which is available on podcast platforms. They interview a lot of people, from people who've experienced trafficking themselves to others who are working in just different parts of the relief work against trafficking. It's really informative. It's really helpful, and I've learned a lot. So definitely check it out.
Okay, I guess you have one more too. I have one more too. Wow, we just keep thinking of amazing resources for you guys. Okay, the other resource I'd recommend is the wonderful Danielle Hanlon, who has been a guest on this podcast, I think maybe 3 times, maybe even more than 3. I don't even know at this point. But she works with She Is Safe, which is anti-trafficking organization, works in all 3 of those areas: rescue, restore. What's the other one? Empower, rehabilitation. Works with all 3 of them. So I will link that also in the show notes. Mackenzie, what's your other one?
I also want to say Exodus Cry has a pretty incredible documentary. It's called Nefarious, and I will say a little bit of a trigger warning. It's pretty intense to watch because it displays different kinds of trafficking in 3 different parts of the world. I'm pretty sure it goes through the Netherlands, Thailand, or Cambodia, and the United States. And so it's just incredible because you get to see everything we're talking about, like the story I described about a girl in South Asia, all the way to somebody you probably knew growing up that just ended up like in a trafficking situation in the United States. It's really incredible. It's really informative, and it shaped my perspective and even how I want to learn more about the issue. So definitely check it out. It's available on YouTube.
Well, Mackenzie, you have beautifully just hosted this podcast episode. This is incredible. You've never hosted a podcast episode before, right?
The adrenaline is just wow.
Through the roof. Well, you did a wonderful job. So incredible. Now we just have one last thing, and it's not a resource. There is one blooper included after we will, we'll stop talking, and then we will plug in our little blooper from this episode we want all of you to enjoy as our going away present.
Yes. Have a good laugh on your way out. And thanks so much for listening to Head to Heart Podcast. We'll see you next time. So, I don't know, a fun fact about me. Let's just see. I am a person that I would consider myself pretty funny. I love to laugh. Let's just say I love to laugh. And so does my friend Jenny, which is why we have so much fun together.
It's true.
Yeah, I would say that I am someone who... Why am I trying to do a dating profile right now?
I love long walks on the beach.
I love Chipotle.
I'm not going to include this. Why did I take the mic? Okay, I just want to say that I love Chipotle so much, and when I was pregnant, I hated Chipotle, and I don't know why, but Avonlea was telling me, do not eat that crap, but now I'm back, baby, and I get a burrito like every week.
I've never seen you so passionate about something. I'm just kidding. But wow.
Yeah, you just mentioned Chipotle. I just had to say it.
Woo! The clock, it's calling me.
And I used to get the bowls. I used to get only the bowls. I didn't realize how good the burritos were. But now I know, because those tortillas are so good. So I only get the burritos now. I'm also dairy free currently, so I bought this tofu tea. It's called tofu tea. It's like a substitute for sour cream because I can't have the sour cream. So I just put tofu tea on every single burrito. I don't know what I'm going to do with this clip. I don't know like where I'm going to put it or if I should save something. You need to introduce yourself.
Okay.
Forget the dating profile. Start talking about where you grew up or you went to college.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Oh my god. Okay, that is crazy. So a little bit about me is that I it's just the aftershocks. Like an earthquake, you know? Like a laugh attack, there's always aftershocks. It's okay.
Go ahead.
That was crazy.
You're such a
Oh
boy. And
It
here we
really
are.
set something off.
Something triggered me, and I just took off.
Funnier. Stop making it funnier. Oh god, I literally am in pain.
Introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Oh my god.
What are you waiting for?
Okay.